I would get trains at 5 o'clock in the morning, traipse off with my projector in a rucksack, laptop in a rucksack, praying that the Wi-Fi was going to work that day.
Because we need to move away from hosting companies being just a pure acquisition business.
I deeply understand beginners in WordPress and the travails they have using WordPress and the joy they have and how life-changing it can be for them.
So one of the things that I think is really quite amazing is when you run into a former student at like a WordCamp or something, and they run up and give you a hug and tell you they have this whole career that's come of it. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. I am your host, Jesse Friedman. Before we dive in, remember to check out impressive.host. It's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and submit questions for upcoming guests. You'll also find all our links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. With me today is Jamie Marsland, the head of WordPress YouTube, and a fellow employee here at Automatic. Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining. I wanted to have you on because I feel like you're doing so much work to educate the public on how to use WordPress and how to be successful with WordPress. And I wanted to see what we think hosts should be doing around that. And so that's what we'll be diving into today. But in the meantime, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello. Thank you for having me on. I'm Jamie. As you said, I'm head of WordPress YouTube, working at Automatic now. Prior to that, I ran my own business in it, which is a company called WordPress, where I started that business doing WordPress training. That's my kind of core background. So actually over the past, 12 years, I've trained over 5,000 people face-to-face in rooms on WordPress. So I deeply understand beginners in WordPress and the travails they have using WordPress and the joy they have and how life-changing it can be for them. It's in my DNA because I've sat in rooms with people and trained thousands and thousands of people. And then I also developed a plugin business throughout that process as well. And prior to that, I ran a publishing business. So not my business, but I ran a publishing business online, but also print. And prior to that, I ran a marketing services business. And prior to that, I was involved in a publishing business. We're going back quite some time. So I'm steeped in publishing. I'm passionate about publishing, and on both sides of it, both being actually running a publishing company, but also kind of providing services to publishing companies as well. And so WordPress is in a perfect sweet spot for me. That was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully it gives you an idea of some of the stuff I've been up to, Jesse.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. So your history with publishing, how long has that been WordPress related?
So yeah, pretty much. I'm going to say, so my last business, I started I first found WordPress because I was running a publishing business, and we were using a .NET platform called Electron, which you probably haven't heard of. But it was a CMS, and we're going back 15 years here, at least, probably 15, 16, 17 years. And that was at the low end of the CMS market, but we were still paying, I think, $5,000 per site per year just to use the software. And I had a very good but quite expensive development team working for me, developing, basically building out the core CMS. And we were doing online publishing systems, things like business directories and things like that, which we were monetizing. But it was taking a long time to build that stuff out. And then I discovered WordPress kind of in my garage one weekend. And then I discovered kind of plugins in one weekend. And I discovered that I could build very quickly kind of what we were building that was taking months to do in Electron. And I don't even know if Electron's still going, but I could do it in like a few days, whereas my very expensive, but very good development team was taking an awful long time to build basically the same thing. And so I got really kind of tuned into WordPress and fell in love with it very quickly and started to bring that into the business in certain pockets of the business where we started using it against certain friction, I guess what you'd say in the business, because they were very purist and .NET, and whereas WordPress kind of was PHP and they looked down at PHP and for all sorts of reasons. So went through that journey, discovered WordPress, brought it into that business. And then when I vacated that business, I kind of thought, well, there's an opportunity here. WordPress was just sort of wasn't just emerging, but I could see kind of where it was going. They gave me a lot of money to basically go on garden leave. So I had a period of time to think about what I wanted to do next. And I started looking around the market, and there were folks out there running WordPress in a day courses aimed at corporates, and they were charging, I think, about £595 per person per day. And I had the sense that there was this emerging DIY market hitting WordPress. And so I literally took out a Google ad, and I've been,
Roughly what year was this?
well, I'm going to say it was 16 years ago, something like that. It was a long time ago,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Sure.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
I took out a Google ad, and literally, I still remember the moment. I was driving down the motorway with my wife to go and visit her mother, and checked the phone, and literally got an order in for my first person on a training course. And I charged like, I think £99 per person. And from that point on, I was just booking out classes, and I was traveling all around the UK, hiring out meeting rooms and even pubs. I did them in pubs. I was trying to get as cheap room as possible, so I could get like 15, 20 people in a room. And then I developed this WordPress in a day course, which I ran for years and years. And yeah, that's how the business started. Literally one Google ad, one order, the most exciting order of my life, having been in corporate life where you do big deals and, £40,000 selling systems into companies, whereas this was £99 and it was still the most exciting order I've ever had, because it kind of told me there's a market and there's money in the hills. And then I was off to the races then. It was just about scaling it. And that's kind of what I did.
That's amazing. That's a marathon starting with that first step.
Yeah.
That's
Great.
I remember those days with .NET. I actually had a client, or rather a company I worked for, that was using a .NET closed source CMS. And I remember the days of having to convince people to switch to WordPress and open source.
Yeah.
And there was this weird paradox where, of course, money was top of mind for them. They wanted to save money. They didn't want to every time you shared a budget with them, they always wanted it to come down a bit. But then, when you shared an open source project like WordPress, all of a sudden it's free. That was questionable. That was a little scary to them. And there was a paradoxical thing there where you had to kind of like convince them that free is okay. And I think the question they always came back with was like, well, who's supporting it? Who's running it? Who's building it? Like, how do we get new features? And how do we know it's going to be around in 10, 15, 20 years? And I don't think we have that conversation as much anymore. Maybe in new verticals or different industries, maybe in the government or something like that. But I don't tend to have to explain WordPress or open source to folks as much anymore.
No, it's definitely shifted into, we may get onto this, but it's shifted into different areas as well. But yeah, that friction's kind of gone as far as I can see. And it's kind of well established in the enterprise market now. And government supports open source as well. So it's like, you don't have to educate the market so much.
That's true. And so you said that you've taught thousands of students, and this was in person. What was the actual location? Was this a college? Was it a studio?
No,
was it a library?
I did them in around the UK. So I did them in Scotland, Wales, London was obviously a big market. And I would just try and get the best deal because the price point was very low. So I was charging sub £100 per.
Yep.
Trying to get like 15 people. So you got to, the key to the business was trying to get the meeting room cost as low as possible. So I spent an awful lot of time just traipsing around London, I ended up going into pubs and saying, look, if you've got a nice meeting room, a lot of these lovely London pubs had nice meeting rooms with good Wi-Fi. So yeah, I would get trains at 5 o'clock in the morning, traipse off with my projector in a rucksack, laptop in a rucksack, praying that the Wi-Fi was going to work that day. Have all sorts of backups in place. I had these little MiFis, I remember now, that I used to take around just in case it didn't. I set up each person's site on a multi-site, I think, back then. So yeah, it was a cool business, and a real privilege to, for a lot of people, this was really life-changing, because these websites they weren't just, blogging about their cats. These were running businesses and enabling them to really change lives. So it was
So these were people who were trying to build a website for their own business, their own needs, not educating someone on how to become a freelancer and build websites repeatedly.
We did have a mix here, but I would say probably actually a few interesting things. And this is all anecdotal, but I would say it's probably 80% DIYers, 20% agencies. I also had some people that came on the course that really looked at my business and loved the idea. So then they went off and actually set up their own WordPress training businesses, which was kind of interesting to see. And I had this one guy, he actually he came on the course, and then he kind of launched this website, and he literally just verbatim copied my entire sales page, to the point that he even put my phone. He was too lazy to even put his own phone number on there, so he actually just copied my phone number. So I was getting these calls from people saying, "I want to come." I'm going to make up his name. I want to come on Jeff's WordPress course. I was like, "Well, you've called me." That's how lazy he was. Yeah, but I would say it was 80% DIYers, people setting up their own sites, and the rest was kind of agencies that are looking to move to WordPress. The other interesting thing that happened was when I started, it was probably demographically, I would say 95% men coming on the course. By the time I kind of stopped them now, since I joined Automatic, that had kind of flipped, which was really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So it wasn't even just a minor, like a small majority. It was a significant majority of women joining the classes to learn WordPress.
Absolutely. It completely flipped. And
yeah, that's fantastic.
I don't want to be too reductive, but they were definitely the better learners as well. They were definitely more open to listening to, advice, whereas I'm being too reductive now. But sometimes men come to those situations with preconceived ideas of how it should work. So yeah, we saw that shift as well. So it was incredible.
That's a funny thing, because I taught at 2 universities for almost 8 hundreds, if not thousands of students. And I taught a variety of classes from JavaScript to Flash to WordPress. So one of the things that I think is really quite amazing is when you run into a former student at like a WordCamp or something, and they run up and give you a hug and tell you they have this whole career that's come of it. But when I started teaching back in 2005, 2006, I would definitely say that the vast majority of students were male. Now, when I stopped teaching in 2014, 15, it was not a flip, but I would definitely say that there was a lot more women taking classes and focusing their energy in that area. And I think that overall computer science started shifting in that direction. Yeah. And it's, maybe now I'm the father of a 17-year-old daughter. Not for one second did I ever think that she couldn't get into computer science, or never wanted to not steer her in that direction if that was a passion of hers. But I think it's funny to think that just 20 years ago, even less than that, we were still trying to shift that mentality that women are, should not only be moving into this field, but are more than welcome to be doing it. And it wasn't something that was, it wasn't top of mind, I don't think, as much back then.
Yeah.
Even like the university recruiters, I think, would tend to lean towards male students and promote computer science classes to them over female students.
Yeah. I think the job market probably was driving some of that change as well in the UK in particular, where I think a lot of the websites that folks were setting up were like side hustles. And so this was a way to kind of supplement family income. But that's, again, it's very anecdotal. But I read this amazing stat the other day that was something like in the UK, something like 50% of people are looking to start or have a side hustle. So the side hustle market is really enormous. And that can be like selling clothes through things like Vinted and things like that, but it's also setting up your own businesses. And I think that's going to, we might come on to this, but I think that's we're going to see an explosion of that stuff, especially around the AI and the opportunities that's going to give many, many people now. I think we're going to see that even multiply more. But we'll see.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope that it moves away from this enabling of large conglomerates. Like I remember when drop shipping became a side hustle that everybody was getting into because, you could leverage things from Amazon and other tools to help, make some money. But at the end of the day, you're just kind of giving a large corporation like Amazon a leg up.
Yeah.
I love the idea of side hustles becoming more prevalent and people being able to explore their passions and make money off of that, whether that's selling clothes or art or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And WordPress is definitely going to continue to empower people there. So nowadays you're teaching in a different format. You're not teaching people physically face to face, maybe not as much.
Yeah.
You probably still go to WordCamps and other things like that. Do you still see the same kind of focus in terms of the demographic of students? Like, are they still people building for themselves, trying to get something launched so that they can get back to work on their business or whatever their passion is?
Yeah, I guess the bit I missed out of the intro is over the last 3.5 years, I started a YouTube channel. So that's kind of, that actually, before I joined Automatic, And that's now about 178,000 subscribers. So it's grown. That's kind of been,
Yeah, that's
it's been
fantastic.
really successful. And that whole journey has been incredible but I think obviously the teaching for 15 years has really made that kind of, I know the pain points that people have. So when I approach a video, I kind of, in my DNA, I know how to hopefully teach it in a way that's succinct and useful to people. But actually at the end of my sort of time with YouTube, that was generating more revenue than my business, which was like, that's weird. And when you get to my age and people say, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a YouTuber. That's weird. But you grow to accept that. And the other interesting thing that's happened is now I still get lots of, I mean, I've paused my sponsorship since joining Automatic. So I don't do any new sponsorships. But I would say 99% of all sponsorship offers, because I still get quite a few every day coming in, are AI companies, which is, there's obviously a lot of cash going into AI at the moment. But I
Sure.
think that
Yeah.
switch as well. I haven't answered your question at all. So yeah, creating content on YouTube is very, very different to teaching in person, but you still get the same thrill when you get when you get a lot of engagement. So some of the videos get an awful lot of engagement, and the beauty is I still get comments from a video I made 2 years ago that when someone was saying, thank you, that's amazing. I wish I'd seen this and it's changed everything for me. So you still get the same thrill. It's slightly different. I actually ran a training course face-to-face in Barcelona a few weeks ago at the OP conference. And it just reminded me of the incredible, doing them in person is just such an incredible feeling when you get that instant reaction. So I want to do more of those going forward.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So these students are finding the YouTube channel. They're probably finding it through YouTube search, Google search, other things. What about the way in which people are introduced to WordPress? Do they kind of find WordPress and then your channel and your videos like in parallel, or are hosting companies actually pushing people to look at YouTube and other channels to help educate them, these customers?
I think they are finding it's quite interesting. I mean, the way that the YouTube algorithm works, clearly you get some people through search, and obviously most of my content is WordPress orientated, but it's starting to broaden out into more sort of AI and more sort of designery type stuff as well. I think your question points at the role of hosting companies and what they can do in terms of pushing people and helping with WordPress. As a YouTube creator, one of the challenges as a YouTube creator is WordPress hosting companies have a lot of the money. They are the source of revenue, so they have they want to do content for you. But actually creating content around hosting is very difficult because it's like and I'd be interested in your view on this. It's like a black box for many people. It's just this thing that happens somewhere, which we have no real idea of what it is. So as a content creator, when a hosting company wants to give me lots of money, which lots of them did or do, actually creating content that's going to be interesting for people is a real challenge, because hosting is a very nebulous thing to try and get your head around as the market of my videos, where people might want to watch my videos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. It's something that we keep exploring on this podcast over and over again, is what is the way in which we're framing hosting. Years ago, you used to you go to WordPress.org, you download the latest version of WordPress, you'd have to upload it to some server somewhere, which meant you had to acquire hosting.
Yeah.
And that was the process in which you would build a website. Now we've closed the gap, we've created the 5-minute install, and now we've gone even beyond that, where hosting companies just sell a WordPress instance on a box somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that as we move away from, and we get a larger distance between the old ways of doing things and this newer way of doing things, and now I think we're going to see even like a faster acceleration with AI. I think people are getting away from the idea of even thinking about hosting. And this is something that I actually wanted to ask you is that, when you think about this audience, this core group of individuals who have some other passion, something else that comes up on this podcast a lot too, is that, you're running a business, you're running a blog, you're doing a side hustle. The actual work of building a website is probably not your passion. It's a means to an
Yep.
end. You're trying to get something up and operational so that you can sell something, distribute something, teach somebody something. And so you are trying to acquire these skills just in order to get something live. And so anytime that we can close the gap and make decisions for customers and help to speed things up, it tends to help them move in a more positive direction, helps things go faster. And so you eliminate a lot of these steps around hosting. You don't have to make decisions around,
Yeah.
how many CPUs you need or how much storage you need or whatever. You're just selling a WordPress.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so then in that case, like, if you're thinking about the way in which you're communicating or teaching individuals to choose hosting, maybe it becomes less about choosing hosting and it's more about if you have a base set of standards for hosting, a certain amount of reliability, uptime, speed, security, then what does it become after that? It's the tools that they provide on top of it. It's the add-ons and the bundles that they include in it. It's the support that they provide to the customer. And that becomes much more focused on a holistic system to help you be successful online and less about the actual box that you're hosting your website on. So, I think shifting towards helping people to be successful and hosting just happens to play a part in that, is probably going to make a lot more sense in the future.
Yeah. I mean, in my DNA, I'm a big advocate for the DIYers and the people that want to self-build their website. So when I go to a pricing page on a typical hosting company, I'm amazed how complex it is. And, for somebody that I've taught, they don't want to know any of that stuff, really. They almost don't want
Sure.
any of it. And the big issues they generally have are like linking a domain name to their website. Setting up email with a domain name is a horror show for a lot of people. That's very painful. So there's all these points of friction that have historically been in the system. Whereas actually for the end user, as you said, they just want it to work. And I think we're starting to see that happen with things like the WordPress.com AI builder. There's no hosting conversation in that. Your first experience is actually building the website, and then the hosting just happens transparently and invisibly in the background. So actually the application layer becomes the thing that they experience, and the hosting is just a thing that we take for granted. It's commodified and it should just work. So I'd be interested in your viewpoint on how you then differentiate as a hosting company. If this is where do you see this is where we're heading?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that you have to look at the greater industry trends, right? So you look at Shopify or Squarespace,
Mhm.
Wix, these closed walled garden. They're not walled gardens, but they're siloed functionality where everything is just built in. And so what that means is that they're able to provide an experience for a customer that does not require you to make endless choices about the minutia of how to build the framework that lives underneath the website that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
And so when you think about a person considering WordPress, they've probably been told, hey, you have all this extensibility, you have all this freedom, you can do anything you want. It can grow from a blog into a store and you don't have to rebuild it. And that can be very exciting and fun. And that can be very exciting and fun. But then all of a sudden, you're like, okay, so where do I go to get WordPress? Well, WordPress.org doesn't solve the hosting problem for you. You can't launch at WordPress.org. It has recommendations, but then all of a sudden, those recommendations can become daunting, right? You have to choose a host. You have to choose between thousands of plugins, thousands of themes. And these decisions can become, as you said, daunting. But then all of a sudden, you're like, okay, so where do I go to get WordPress? Well, WordPress.org doesn't solve the hosting problem for you. You can't launch at WordPress.org. It has recommendations, but then all of a sudden, those recommendations can become daunting, right? You have to choose a host. You have to choose between thousands of plugins, thousands of themes. And these decisions can become, as you said, daunting. They can become a major struggle for end customers. So what we need to think about, and that's why, I'm very excited for that WordPress.org AI builder, because it kind of exemplifies that idea of decisions, not options. Help us to understand what it is that you're trying to build. Let us make some decisions for you, and then we can kind of figure out all the pieces underneath of it. And I think it would be wise for hosting companies to start to think about obfuscating the behind the scenes stuff and just make intelligent, intuitive recommendations as time goes on. For the most part, if you're just getting started and you're running a mom and pop shop or a retail store, or even a brick and mortar, right? Like, and it's kind of a brochure website,
Yeah.
power and resources and vertical scaling and all these other tools that might come bundled with your hosting is not going to be super important to you. And so you don't need to describe that to them. So what you could do is you could just get them started building a website sooner, kind of hide that layer. Then when it becomes a problem, if they're starting to run into resource limitations, or they're getting so much traffic, these are good problems to have and good problems
Yeah.
to explain to a customer,
Yeah.
right? And I think that that's something that's become super important when you're communicating to end customers, is that the contextual relevance of the message that you're giving to them, because there is so much information being thrown at them all the time, especially within WordPress. One of the things that WordPress really needs to improve is the way in which we have kind of funnel communication from plugins and themes and posts and everything into a singular path so that the customer can consume it in a way that makes sense. But with all of that information being thrown at them, if you can eliminate the questions that you have early on that are not super relevant to you building a website and becoming and getting live, and think about it later and say, hey, over the last 6 months, you've grown from 2,000 visitors a month to 200,000 visitors a month. It's time for you to think about performance and scaling and all those other things. Here are some options that make sense to you. And then you can really start to align yourself with the success of your customer, which is another common theme that we see in this podcast around the responsibility that a host has to their customers, is to make sure that they're not just selling something and kind of leaving it to them to figure out, that you're actually aligning the success of the host and their business with the success of that customer. Because we need to move away from hosting companies being just a pure acquisition business, just trying to bring people in. Because what we've seen is that you bring people in, when they churn from a hosting company because they had a poor WordPress experience, in their minds, they're not thinking, I'll go try it with another host. They're thinking, I'm going to go to Shopify. I'm going to go to Squarespace or something like that. And that's to the detriment of the overall ecosystem.
Yeah, I've been playing with a few AI tools recently, well, a lot, like Lovable and Bolt. And actually, I was just using Lovable for just a test. And actually, so you build a site with that, and then you don't even you can add a custom domain, but you have no idea where it's hosted. I mean, literally, there's no idea where you would get support for that hosting, or if anything goes wrong, you've got no real support. You're just kind of left. I imagine you're just left hanging. But it's a very, very seamless experience from the end user point of view. There's no complexity. There's no technical complexity. Question back. I'm going to ask you another question. Sorry, but why do you think hosting is? Because if we're being really, really reductive around the kind of market, we've got DIYers and we've got agencies, and they're both incredibly important to the WordPress ecosystem. Why do you think hosting is so? I think that is probably almost every hosting company you go to. It's so complicated in terms of the language and the way it's sold. Why do you think we've got to this? Why do you think we've got to this point where a huge market is not interested in that? Why are we where we're at?
It's a really great question. And I'm not sure that there's a singular, simple answer that you can just point to, but my personal feeling goes from two pieces of our history. I mentioned before how WordPress required you to download the software itself and then go and find hosting somewhere else. The open source nature of WordPress and the fact that it allows for you to install that software anywhere, and you can do it locally or you can do it on server, you can buy your own server, you can AWS it, you can whatever. That freedom then adds a layer of complexity, right? The same thing with the level of extensions that we have, the number of plugins that we have for WordPress. The freedom to install anything you want on WordPress also means that you have the complexity of increased security threats and outdated software and a lack of support and other things that you have to traverse. And so one of the issues that we need to solve for, I think, with WordPress is that we need to identify that is our history. It is not necessarily our future.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second part of this is that I think hosting companies are, and it's a shame, but we are not great at segmenting customers yet. A lot of times, it's marketing driven. We think about the web as this place where people want to make a lightning fast decision. You have to get them in the door, and we get very focused on acquisition and turning a viewer into a customer.
Yeah.
But what would actually be really helpful is for us to do a little bit more discovery about the customer, to understand their level of expertise, what it is that they're hoping to achieve. Because if you're running an agency and you know that your business relies on the reliability that your customers feel from the hosting company,
Yeah.
you're going to check out the specs. You're going to look for, like, for example, like with WP Cloud, one of the things that we offer is automated real-time failover. It's a way in which we mirror a site onto another server. So if there was any kind of catastrophic failure, you would immediately, we reroute traffic in real time so that you never experience any downtime. To a agency or developer or a systems engineer, that type of technology is super important and very relevant. You want to educate them on that.
Yeah.
But to an end customer, who is a DIYer who's just trying to get something live, the way in which you explain that is very differently, and you just talk about uptime. You talk about reliability at a much higher level, and you kind of abstract it, and you say, like, your site just isn't going to go down. Your business can rely on this hosting company. I think if we got to a place where we were doing a better job of segmenting those customers, we could explain things in very different ways.
Yeah.
And then have a better conversation, kind of personalized one-on-one conversation with these end customers. And when you get to a place where your DIYer is less interested in the technological underpinnings of what makes up a host, you can really drive them towards just building a site and getting things live. Whereas with an agency or a dev, you're going to get them into a panel, you're going to get them into a dashboard where you're going to help them understand the tools and the workflows they can build and things. It takes them down, even though it's built on the same technology, it takes them down a very different route. And so I think as an industry, hosting companies just need to get a lot better at doing that.
Yeah. You've kind of triggered a lot of questions in my head. Is that all right if I So one of the questions I had.
Oh, I want to hear those questions, but unfortunately we're at the 30-minute mark. You can believe how fast these conversations go, right?
Crazy, yeah.
So if it's all right with you, I think we'll take a break and we'll come back for a second episode and continue this conversation. I love what we're doing here, though. You're interviewing me, which is rare on this podcast, but I love it. All right. Well, thank you, Jamie. We'll be back with a second episode shortly.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.